So, hello. Good evening sa inyo. So, ito, discussion ulit tayo for CFAS na ito yung tawag ito? Ito yung magiging second to the last lecture video natin for this subject. Oo, kasi next lecture video, yun na yung magiging last natin, obviously. Kaya nga second to the last video. So, with that, ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon is 5 standards, PFRS 10 to PFRS 14. So, with that, let's start na tayo. So ngayon ang pag-uusapan natin is Ang pag-uusapan natin is PFRS 10 Consolidated Financial Statement. So PFRS 10 tayo ngayon. Ngayon itong PFRS 10, itong Consolidated Financial Statements, na-mention naman natin to last time pa, di ba? Nung kino-compare natin sa yung napag-usapan natin yung investment and associates, yung napag-usapan natin yung joint ventures, di ba? Joint arrangements, yung napag-usapan natin yung sa PFRS 9, di ba? Kasi may hierarchy of control yan. Di ba? May hierarchy of ownership when it comes to kung saan yung highest, yeah? Napag-usapan rin natin to yung sa business combination, yeah? Kung saan yung highest is yung parent subsidiary relationship, kung saan si parent may control kay subsidiary. Yung second, yeah, kasi yung kay parent and subsidiary relationship, yun? Di ba? May control si parent over kay subsidiary. Kasi yung ownership niya, pinag-usapan natin yung PFRS 3, yung sa business combination. Kasi ito yung yung follow-up niya. Si PFRS 10, diba? Kasi business combination, yun yung start. Doon sila nag-combine, doon nagkaroon ng acquisition. Ngayon, yung continuing relationship nila, yung na sila, di ba? Nag-operate na sila, eto na yun, si Consolidated Financial Statements. Yeah? Si Consolidated Financial Statements, yung sabi natin, yun. Then yung sa baba niya, ni control, ni parent-subsidiary relationship is si joint venture, si investment in associate, kung saan significant influence lang, di ba? Yung sa baba ni significant ni investment in associate is yung si PFRS 9, yeah? Under basically yung sa held for sale, etc. Parang simpleng investor ka lang, ganun. Wala kang control, wala kang significant influence, sadyang nag-i-invest ka lang. Yung another types of ownership, yeah, yung sa joint venture, joint arrangement, kung saan partner kayo, not necessarily partner, may kasama ka na para ng joint venture, di ba? Yung mga simpleng topics lang yun, mga simpleng ownership over businesses. Ito na yung pinakamalaki, di ba? Yung may control talaga. Si parent-subsidiary relationship, kung saan napag-usapan natin yung PFRS 9, ulitin ko lang, sa PFRS 3, kung saan sa PFRS 3, yung simulan ng kanilang pagmamahalan, kumbaga, yung dinidiscuss doon, the acquisition part, yeah? Yung starting point. Pagdating dito sa Consolidated Financial Statements, PFRS 10, as we have said ulit tayo dito. Bakit? Kasi mas mahalaga, mahalaga yung ma-retain yan sa utak nyo. So repetition is very important. Kung saan, pagdating dito sa Consolidated Financial Statements, pinag-usapan dito yung na yung mangyayari pag nag-ooperate na sila. And since we're talking about accounting, paano natin ipipresent yung yung financial statements nila considering the relationship of being a parent-subsidiary, kung saan si parent may control kay subsidiary. So yun na, papaano yung presentation yan? Yun yung sinasagot ni PFRS 10. And as I have said ulit sa PFRS 3 business combination, etong si PFRS 10, accounting, sa BAPE 7 nyo pag third year na kayo, mga WIMSU pips ko dyan, pag third year na kayo, yan, third year first sem, pag-usapan niyan BAPE 7. Accounting for business combination, yung under tong subject. So, and as you know, that since advanced accounting yan, ibig sabihin, advanced na topic to. Pero, sir, paano yan? CFAS pa lang kami. Don't worry, kasi dito pag-usapan na natin yung core principle niya. Ano yung main point niya sa buhay niya? Anong labot niya sa buhay niya? Yun ang pag-usapan natin. Kasi promise, kailangan matibay muna yung foundation nyo sa FAR bago kayo pumasok ng advanced accounting. Bakit? Kasi from the title of the subject itself, advanced accounting. So, mas higher level na yung degree of difficulty ng topics. So, anong learning objectives natin for this topic or for this standard? Una, state the elements of control. As we have said, yeah? A parent-subsidiary relationship, the highest in the hierarchy because the parent has control over the subsidiary. Kung bibigyan natin yan ng number, diba? As we have said last time, 50%, 51% and above yung ownership sa voting rights. Pangalawang learning objective natin is describe the consolidation procedures. So with that, definition of terms tayo is provided by PFRS 10. Diba? Familiar na kayo sa mga terms na to kasi napag-usapan natin ito ng PFRS 3, business combination. Si parent, si magulang, this is the entity that has control on one or more entities. Diba? So may control. And yung kinokontrol niyan, tawag natin sa kanya is subsidiary. So yan, parent, control over subsidiaries. Subsidiary 1, subsidiary 2, subsidiary 3. Group, a parent and its subsidiaries. So yun, pag kinombine na sila, yun, parents and subsidiaries na. Group ang tawag doon. Yeah? Diba? Lopez Group of Companies. So yeah. Yun, group yun. Kung yan ay mga conglomerates na kung tinatawag natin. Or kung sa Korea pa yan, chaebol. Dito tayo sa consolidated financial statements. The financial statements of a group in which the assets, liabilities, equity, income, expenses, and cash flows of the parent and subsidiaries are presented as if they are treated as a single economic entity. So, na yung trato sa kanila. Yan ay nangyayari sa consolidated financial statements. May group tayo kung saan nandyan yung mga parents and subsidiaries niya. Then, when presenting their FS, consolidated yan. The financial statements of a group kung saan yung lahat ng elements, lahat ng nilalaman ng kanilang financial statements, kino-combine yan. Kino-consolidate. Yeah? From the word itself, kino-consolidate. And it is presented as single economic entity. Ngayon, a parent entity is required to present a Conso FS. Pero, may mga exceptions yan. The parent is subsidiary of another entity and all its other owners do not object to the parent not presenting consolidated financial statements. So parang may may grandparent pa siya kumbaga. May grandparent pa siya. Then nag-decide siya since may grandparent pa siya, may mas nakakataas sa kanya, yeah? Ladder, yeah? Parent not necessarily grandparent, ginagawa natin ng term na grand para makita natin yung hierarchy, yeah? P. Tapos itong si parent, meron siyang subsidiaries. So ito siya. Ito yung niya. Ito yung situation niya. Meron pa siyang meron pa siyang mas mataas sa kanya. Mas mataas sa kanya. Then, and all its other owners do not object to the parent not presenting a Conso FS considering na naisip nila na since subsidiary naman ako ng another higher parent sa akin, doon ko na lang i-present, doon na lang mapupunta yung aking financial transactions, diba? Doon na lang mapupunta para isahan na lang. The parent, pangalawa tayo, another exception, the parent debt or equity instruments are not traded in a public market or being processed for such purpose. Kasi nga, as you have said, mas malaki yung degree of responsibility when the company or when the entity is being traded publicly sa stock exchange. Mas malaki yung degree of responsibility nila because they basically serving the public they're making their business available, their stocks available for the public to purchase. With that, there's a higher degree of responsibility for them to present a Conso FS. But if they are not traded in a public market, in the stock exchange, okay, goods lang. Kahit hindi sila mag-present. Pangalawa, the parent's ultimate or any intermediate parent produces consolidated financial statements that are available for public use and comply with PFRS. So yan. But pagdating dito sa Pilipinas, usually may regulate yung government regulatory yan nagpapa-require ng Conso FS. So anong elements ng control? Ito napag-usapan rin naman natin to. Control. This is that concept that distinguishes a parent-subsidiary relationship, that distinguishes PFRS 3 and PFRS 10 from other forms of ownership over an entity. The existence of control. May control yung bumili. May control si acquirer. Hindi lang significant influence, hindi lang basta simpleng investors, hindi lang basta joint, but rather a control over the acquiree, yung binili niya. So, paano natin malalaman na may control? So, ano yung control exists if the investor has all of the following. Power over the investee. Yeah? May influence talaga. Hindi lang necessary influence, kinokontrol niya. O kung hanapin nyo another synonyms din pa sa control yan. Pangalawa, exposure or rights to variable returns from its involvement with the investee. Yeah? Variable returns. As compared to a fixed return, ang variable returns, pabago-bago yan. Iba-iba yung, hindi fix yung, basically, kaya opposite eh. Hindi fix yung nare-receive na return ni entity. Anong example yan? Dividends. Diba? Yung ordinary dividends, ordinary shares, yung dividends niya. Diba? Hindi yan fix. Depende yan sa kung anong mangyari. Depende sa performance. Depende sa decision ng board. That is variable return. Another, tax benefits, yung sa interest, sa future liability problems. Kaya may listahan yan under PFRS din. Ano yung mga example ng variable returns? Pero pinaka-familiar tayo pagdating sa dividends. From its involvement with the investee. And lastly, the ability to use its power over the investee to affect the amount of the investor's return. Primary example, may kapangyarihan ka. Ikaw yung nag-influence sa board. Kontrolado mo yung board. Sino bang nagde-decide? Magkano yung i-declare na dividends? Di yung board. So, that is an ability to use its power over the investee to affect the amount of the investor's return. Kontrolado mo ang board. Sino nagde-decide ng dividends na i-declare? Ang board. Sabi mo board, ito yung gusto kong amount of dividends na i-declare nyo for this year. Number 3. So, pag yan sila lahat nag-exist, there's control. And if there's control, parent-subsidiary relationship. So, ito, power, ability to affect returns, variable returns, control. So, accounting requirements. So, mga additional na ito. Consolidated financial statements shall be prepared using uniform accounting policies. So, dapat pare-pareho yung accounting policies na ginagamit ng mga participants or ng mga those involved doon sa CFAS. Kung ano ginagamit ni parent, yun yung gagamitin ni subsidiary. Ngayon ito yung pag nag-audit kayo. Nag-audit kayo sa Manila, sa auditing firms. Yan, isa yun sa mga mahihirap na gawin yung consolidation ng mga FS. Kasi pag napunta kayo sa isang group doon sa auditing firm kung saan ang trabaho nyo is mag-conso ng mga financial statements, lalo na kapag yung subsidiaries ng parent galing pa sa ibang bansa, kailangan nyo pa i-convert. Pag yung subsidiary si parent, yung mga 15 subsidiaries siya meron, so kailangan nyo i-conso. So kailangan nyo pa, mahirap yan kapatid. So yan ang ginagawa. Para mas mapadali, dapat uniform accounting policy nila. Meron yan yung parent na sa Zamboanga o na Zamboanga na sa Pilipinas, yung subsidiary na sa ibang lugar, paano yan? Paano pag iba yung ginagamit na accounting standard ng ibang lugar? Kailangan mo yung i-translate papunta para maging uniform yung accounting policy. Second bullet point, the financial statements of the parents and its subsidiaries used in preparing Conso FS shall have the same reporting date, and kapag magkaroon ng difference, maximum of 3 months lang. Consolidation begins from the date the investor obtains control of the investee and ceases when the investor loses control of the investee. Ito na, pag-usapan natin to. Sa pa lang, kailan ka magre-report ng consolidation, kung kailan ka naka-obtain ng control, kailan ka mag-stop, mag-report ng consolidation, kailan ka nawala ng control. Yeah. Don't worry, kahit na medyo complex or advanced yung topic na to, yung core principle lang pag-usapan natin kasi CFAS lang to eh. So, theory of accounts lang to. So, don't worry too much. Ang mahalaga, maintindihan nyo kung anong gustong i-point out ng PFRS 10. So, with that said, ano yung measurement Ano yung measurement? Kasi yung sa business combination, ang pinag-usapan basically natin is yung initial measurement. Pagdating dito sa ConsoFS, ito na yung subsequent measurement. Diba? Initial, kasi business combination, doon nagsimula. Consolidated, ito na yung continuing. Ito na yung after nangyari yung business combination. Ano yung magiging relationship nila? Ito na yung subsequent measurement. Income and expenses of the subsidiary are based on the amounts of the assets and liabilities recognized in the ConsoFS at the acquisition date. Na-mention natin sa PFRS. Investment in subsidiaries are accounted for in the parent separate FS either at cost in accordance with PFRS financial instruments or using the equity method. Ito, di ba? Sa starting yan, ang pagdating kasi sa ng ConsoFS, mga kapatid, sa starting yan, nag-business combination sila. So, ito, sabi natin ito yung timeline. At this point, nag-business combination sila. Yeah. Sabi natin 2020 to. Ngayon, after that, lalo na kapag iba yung operations nila, separate na yan sila. Tarara, for the rest of the year. Tarara, gawin nila sariling operations sila, etc. etc. Pero pagdating ng reporting date, let's say for the year 1231, pagdating ng Conso reporting date, yan na, magiging as-one ulit sila. Oo, ganyan nangyari. Business combination dito, sabi natin end of 2020, nag-business combination sila. After ng business combination nila, most especially kapag iba yung operation sila, may separate operation sila, may kanya-kanya na sila ng reporting. Kanya-kanya sila ng operation sa gagawin. Minsan, baka may mga intertwining transactions, so baka sila sa isa't isa, mag-transact sila sa isa't isa. Nangyari yan. And kino-consider rin yan pag nagko-ConsoFS kayo. So yan. Pero basically yung operations nila, yan tuloy-tuloy na. Pero pagdating ng reporting date for the ConsoFS, yan, magiging as-one yan ulit sila sa preparation. Magiging consolidated financial statements. Pero for this meantime, yan sila, may separate na sila, may separate financial statements yan sila. Separate para kay parent, separate para kay subsidiary. Then yung kay subsidiary, kukunin niya ni parent para si parent i-consolidate niya. Kukunin niya yung separate FS si subsidiary para i-consolidate niya pagdating ng ConsoFS reporting date. Ganyan nangyari sa totoong buhay. Ngayon, concept ni NCI. And as we have said last time, ano nga ba itong si NCI? As we have said sa PFRS 3, nang nag-e-exist lang yan si NCI, nag-e-exist lang to siya kapag si parent hindi 100% ang in-acquire na ownership. Pag hindi 100%, let's say 90% lang, yung 10% dyan, pagmamay-ari ng ibang investor. Kung saan, since pagmamay-ari ng ibang investor, consider and wala silang control. Yeah? Wala silang control over the subsidiary. Sa subsidiary mo, tawag sa kanila, non-controlling interest. Yeah? Recap lang sa napag-usapan natin. So, pero kapag 100% yung acquisition mo ng stocks, ng voting rights, ng voting powers, edi walang NCI, 0% yan. Pero kapag hindi 100% yung ginawa mong acquisition, edi may NCI yan. Kasi may remaining investors pa. So, non-controlling interest in net assets of the subsidiary. NCI shall be presented in the ConsoFS of the FS of the financial position, yung balance sheet. Consolidated nabubululit tayo. Shall be presented in the consolidated statement of financial position within the equity section, separately from the equity of the owners of the parent. So basically, ito yung equity portion, equity portion, lagay ka dyan ordinary shares, share premium, retained earnings. Itong si NCI, may separate yan siya. May separate line item yan siya. Ganyan. Yan, may separate line item yan siya. Again. Ganyan lang basically. So, non-controlling interest in the net assets consists of the following. The amount determined at the date of acquisition and the NCI shares of changes in equity. Ito, pagdating natin sa accounting for business combination, kapag akong teacher dyan, yan, kukompute natin yan. Pero take note, as I have said ulit sa PFRS 3 and ito ngayon sa PFRS 10, ang kagandahan kasi sa business combination, ang kagandahan kasi sa consolidated financial statements, sa totoo lang, is kapag, kahit hindi mo gets yung yung topic, natin siya hindi mo gets, pero hindi mo gets yung labot niya ba? Yung core niya, yung gusto niyang sabihin sa'yo, makakasolve ka pa rin, kapatid. Bakit? Kasi, yung business combination, yung CFAS, it is very procedural in nature. Kabisaduhin mo lang ang procedure, magagawan mo yan ng answer. Yan yung kagandahan sa business combination. Yes, it is an advanced topic. Yes, it is a hard topic. There's no doubt about that. No, there's no sugarcoating that. But if you are going to, pag na-take nyo na to, makikita mo, very procedural. Just kabisaduhin mo lang yung procedure, goods ka na sa answer mo. Pero of course, mas maganda pa rin na mag-gets mo yung topic. Hindi lang nagpa-follow ka ng procedure. NCI in profit or loss and comprehensive income. Ito sa di ba? Ito sa balance sheet, ito naman sa income statement. The profit or loss of each component of other comprehensive income in the consolidated statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income shall be attributed to the following: owners of the parents and yung non-controlling interest. Like for example, si subsidiary, ito example lang to. Wala na tayo masyadong solving dito kasi nga CFAS lang to. Si subsidiary, yung kinokontrol na entity, nagkaroon ng 100k na income, profit, or same lang yun. So, meron yung tinatawag na dito na parent, subsidiary, NCI, and conso. So, column yan sila. Tapos dito, ilalagay mo na yung mga amounts ng nila na attributed to them. So, let's say si parent is 80% ownership. Yung NCI mo, 20%. So, mangyayari dyan, what is 80% of 100k? So, 80k kay parent from the from the profit of the subsidiary, yung 20% or yung 20k, punta kay NCI. So, yan nakalagay dito. 80k kay parent, 20 kay NCI. Ganyan nangyayari. Pero of course, this is a very simplified example ng pagdating dito sa But don't worry, procedural, madali lang yan. Wala yung issue. Ngayon, dito tayo sa preparing the CFAS. Consolidated financial statements are prepared by combining the financial statements of the parent and subsidiaries line by line by adding together similar items ng assets, liabilities, equity, income, expenses. Sir, ganyan lang kadali. I-add mo lang yung asset ni parent pati asset ni subsidiary. I-add mo lang ang liabilities pati ang liabilities nilang dalawa. I-add mo lang yung equity nilang dalawa. Yung income and expenses nila. Ganun lang kadali, sir. Add mo lang. No. Merong mga complexities na kailangan dyan. Or may mga factors na kailangan i-consider when it comes to that. Yun yung tinatawag natin yung tawag dito? Yung intercompany transaction. Yun yung nagpapabigay ng difficulty. Difficult ba? Yun yung nagpapabigay ng additional additional excitement pagdating sa CFAS. It is not a mere adding of assets, liabilities, equity, income, and expenses. No. Intercompany transactions makes it a little more exciting. Bakit? Kasi nga, kahit na parent subsidiary na yan, they are not restricted from engaging in transactions with each other. No, they are not restricted. They can. And they will. So, like for example, parent subsidiaries. Ito, yeah? It is not a simple adding of assets, liabilities. No. Parent subsidiaries. Si parent, Nagbenta ng merchandise kay subsidiary. Si subsidiary, binayaran si parent. Ngayon, pag separate FS yan, okay, goods lang, reporting nila. Si parent, naka-receive ng sales, naglabas ng inventory, nagbenta siya. Inventory. Payment. Nagbenta si parent ng inventories kay subsidiary. So, naglabas siya ng nag-deduct siya ng inventories. Nag-credit siya ng inventories. Siya ng sales. Naka-receive siya ng asset, whether that's cash or accounts receivable. Goods yan. Si subsidiary, naka-receive siya ng inventories, nagbayad siya ng cash, or naka-incur siya ng accounts payable. On the separate financial statements, that is okay lang. Pero pagdating ng consolidated financial statements, hindi na yan pwede. Kailangan mo yan tanggaling yan. Kailangan mo i-consider yan. Bakit? In the separate FS, they are treated as a separate entity, independent from each other. But when it comes to consolidated financial statements, anong ginawa natin kanina? They are now treated as a single economic entity. Single economic entity. Parang ikaw na yan, single. So, using that concept, ano ang masasabi mong logic behind that? Ang reasoning? It is like, di ba? You're putting cash from, kasi treated na sila sa single entity. So, it's like you're getting one cash from your pocket and just putting it to another pocket. That's nonsense. Because in this case, you're already treated as single economic entity. So, bakit mo i-record yan? Bakit mo i-consider? Magiging bloated, magiging understated, magiging overstated yung mga accounts mo pag ganun yung nangyari. Kasi nonsense. Kasi nga, treated na kayo sa single entity. So, nonsense na magre-record ka ng sale transaction, nonsense na magre-record ka ng inventory transactions when you're just, in the sense of a consolidated FS, you're just entering into transactions with your own self, putting money from one pocket to another and then recording that. That's nonsense when it comes to the point of view of a consolidated financial statements. Hence, intercompany transactions should be taken into consideration. Yun yung nagpapahirap, nagpapakomplex pagdating sa Conso FS, yung intercompany transactions. It is not a mere adding of assets, liabilities, equity, income. No. You need to consider the intercompany transactions, but of course, sa advanced accounting, part 2 na natin pag sa accounting for business combination. Pero yun yung yun yung main reasoning. Bakit yan? Bakit nagpapahirap yan ang Conso FS? As you can see, di ba sa business combination, madali lang yun. Madali lang ang business combination. Conso FS yung deadly. Let's continue. So, with that, consolidation at date of acquisition, eliminate the investment subsidiary account. Isa yun sa procedural matters na to. Kasi procedural to siya eh. Procedural yung pag-solve dito. Eliminate the investment in subsidiary account. This requires measuring the identifiable assets acquired and liabilities assumed in the business combination at their acquisition date verbal. Ito rin ulit. Diba? Napag-usapan natin sa PFRS 3 na yung value yung value ng ni parent, book value. Pero yung value ng mga items, ng mga accounts ni subsidiary, hindi book value ang ibig gagamitin, but rather yung kanilang acquisition date fair value. Yun. Ngayon, in that case, pagdating sa balik tayo dito sa timeline natin, on the time of the business combination, yan, relevant yan sa acquisition date fair value ni subsidiary. Yan yung gagamitin. Pero after ng kanilang business combination, as we have said, after nyan, meron na silang kanya-kanyang buhay. Mag-operate na yan sila on their own. So, separate FS yan sila. Pero pagdating ulit ng consolidated financial statements ng end of the year reporting para sa Conso FS, balik ulit sa determination ng, gagamitin mo ulit yung acquisition date fair value. Kasi nga, yun yung ginamit sa business combination nila. Yan, di ba? Recognizing the goodwill from the business combination, And pagdating sa goodwill, isa lang yung kino-consider mo is kapag nagkaroon ng impairment sa goodwill. Kino-consider mo rin yan. Of course, napag-usapan na yan, di ba? When it comes to impairment, particularly sa goodwill, check mo kung may impairment. Pangatlo, eliminating the subsidiaries pre-combination equity accounts and replacing them with non-controlling interests. Add line by line similar items of assets and liabilities of the combining constituents. Yeah. It's not, pero of course, as you have said kanina, it is not a mere simpleness of adding line by line items. Intercompany transactions will complicate the matter. So, with that, yan ang discussion. Yeah? Simple lang. Because CFAS lang to. We're talking about the core principle of the standard. Hindi tayo dito para mag-in-depth discussion. Ang importante lang ginagawa natin dito is for you to understand the core principle. To understand the labot of that standard. Kasi, as I have said, for the third or fourth time, Advanced Accounting Part 2, Accounting for Business Combination, BAPE 7, doon na tayo mag-enjoy. So, application of concepts tayo. Ito, yung application of concept dun sa part 2, problem 2 sa chapter na yan is solving. So, a little taste lang. So, use the following information for the next 2 questions. Kuha tayo sa CalQ. On January 1, 2001, Entity A acquires Entity B in a business combination. No? Entity A acquires Entity B. So, si Entity A yung parent. Entity B yung acquiree, subsidiary. So, the financial statements of the following of the combining constituents are follow. So, ito. Saan yung, No? Ayun. Parent, subsidiary. So, yan na. So, additional information. Entity B. Entity B's assets and liabilities are stated at their acquisition date fair values except for the following. So, kita nyo, ito yung konting simpleng glimpse lang ng solving sa Conso FS pero yung madaling solving. So, inventory, yung book value niya is 27,600. Pero yung acquisition date fair value niya, yung ginamit ng business combination is 37,200. Building, 57,600. Pero yung book value niya is 48. As you have said, di ba, parent, book value yan. Subsidiary, when consolidating, and when business combining or combination, acquisition date fair value ginagamit yan. Anything other than that, yung sarili niya, yung sa timeline na pag-usapan natin. Pero pagdating ng business combination, pagdating ng Conso FS, acquisition date fair value ginagamit sa kanya, kay subsidiary. So, goodwill, determined under PFRS, yung business combination, 3.6. The NCI and the net assets of subsidiary also determined under PFRS is 21,600. So, ito, given yung NCI na ilalagay mo sa equity, 21,600. Given yung goodwill mo na ilalagay mo sa asset section, 3,600. So, how much is the consolidated total assets on January 1, 2000? So, Conso total assets, dito, Conso total equity. Excuse me po. So, with that, so, add natin yung mga Ito, since walang sinabing intercompany transaction, magpasalamat ka sa Diyos. Bakit? Hindi to komplikado. Pero pag may intercompany transaction siya, yung lalagay dito sa additional information, yun, magdasal ka na sa mga pinaniniwalaang mong mga bagay. Kasi, yun na yung wow. Pero since simple lang naman to eh. So, add lang. Pero pag may intercompany transaction siya, woohoo. Kung gusto nyo malaman gano'ng kahirap yan, may video naman ako dito kasi ako nga nagturo nito last sem. May video naman ako dito sa topic na to. Sa accounting for business combination, kung gusto nyo makita gano'ng kahirap, nandito yun. Nasa tawag dito? Nasa YouTube channel naman na to. Nandiyan lang. Posted yan lahat. Kung gusto nyo makita gano'ng kahirap yung PFRS. Ay natin sa PFRS yung ginagawa sa PFRS 10. But, you will also realize that it is very procedural in nature. So, cash in bank, add natin 12 times 18K to. Dito tayo natin. Taas natin to. So, ito Conso natin. Lagating Conso. Conso. So, ito. Cash in bank, so 18K. Dati nilagay, tipid tayo sa ano. Accounts receivable, meron, ano bang inventory pati building lang ano. So, ito, 36 plus 14.4, 50.04. 50.4K. Ito naman, inventory, take note, gagamitin natin 27,600? No. 37,200 ang gagamitin natin. So, 37,200 plus, ano yung isa? 48,000. Oy. 85.2. Huwag nyo gamitin siya, no? Gamitin nyo yung acquisition date fair value niya kasi we are consolidating. Yeah? 85.2. Next is investment subsidiary. As we have said dito, eliminate mo yan. So, wala yan. Eliminate. Building net, 216 plus, gagamitin natin yung 57,600. 2 plus 216. That is 273,600. Point or 600 na lang natin. 18,000, 50,400, 85,200 plus 273,600. Yan lang ba? May goodwill tayo, kapatid. May goodwill tayo of 3,600. Goodwill. 3.6. So, add natin to. So, 18 plus 50.4 plus 85.2 plus 273.6 plus 3.6. That is 430. 430,800. 430,800. Now, alam niyo na kung ano yung nandito, yan yung magiging ano dito sa liabilities and equity natin. Pero of course, try na rin natin to CLI add. So, add nyo lang to. Add nyo lang to. Ilan to sila? 67 to share capital. Take note pala dito. Etong sa tatlong to, diba, nakalagay dito, eliminating the subsidiaries pre-combination equity accounts and replacing them with non-controlling interest. So, in this case, disregard nyo to. Yung kay parent lang ilagay nyo. So, yung kay parent lang ilagay nyo dito. So, yung 204, yung 78, and yung 60. Parent ang ilagay natin dyan. Bakit? I-replace natin yung equity accounts ni subsidiary into the non-controlling interest. And since the non-controlling interest is 21,600, yun ang ilalagay mo dito. 21,600. So, with that, add natin sila. 67.2 plus 204 plus 78 plus 60 plus 21.6. 430. Sakto. 430. 800. Don't forget the double rule. Double rule. So, di ba? Basic. Pag simple. Pag simple. So, ang answer natin dito sa kabila, 430,800. So, how much is the consolidated total equity? So, add mo lang siya, no? 204 plus si 78 plus si 60 plus si 21.6, that's 363. Ito, basically, ito. 363. Ayan. Yan si CFAS. Madali siya intindihin. Pero minsan nahihirapan ng estudyante kasi yung solving niya matindi. Pero since yung solving is procedural, nakakatulong naman yun sa pagiging para padaliin yung niya. Pero huwag kayo matakot. Chill lang yan. So, next topic tayo. So, dito tayo ngayon sa next standard, which is PFRS 11. Na itong PFRS 11 joint arrangement, you will be madidiscuss nyo to on accounting for special transactions, BAPE 6, pagdating nyo sa third year, and chill topic lang siya. Chill topic lang yan siya. Wala yung sa problema sa kanya. So, punta tayo sa joint arrangement. So, anong learning objectives natin for this one? Define a joint arrangement and state daw yung characteristics niya. Second, differentiate between a joint operation and a joint venture. So, joint arrangement. Diba napag-usapan natin? There are different types of relationship that an investor has over his investee. Yung unang napag-usapan natin was PAS 28, which is the investment in associate, kung saan yung relationship nila is basically under the guise of the significant influence spectrum. Yeah? Yung second na napag-usapan natin was business combination na. And yung recently lang na o yung kanina lang na tawag dito consolidated financial statements. Yun, anong relationship nila? Ni investor kay investee? Control yung relationship niya. May control siya. Parent-subsidiary relationship sila. Yung isa pa na pag-usapan natin is yung sa PFRS 9 kung saan regular investor lang. Si investor over ang relationship niya kay investee. Yung another type of relationship between an investor and investee is this one, the joint arrangement. Yeah? Yung sa regular investor, wala kang control, wala kang significant influence, simpleng investor ka lang. Significant influence, yun, di ba? At least 20% threshold to 50%. Pag less than 20%, may i-consider ka rin yan para masabi mo ring significant influence. Pagdating sa parent-subsidiary relationship, business combination, CFAS, PFRS 3 and PFRS 10, 51% pataas. 51% and above para ma-consider mo as control. Pagdating din sa joint arrangement, parang na-occupy niya lahat ng percentages sa over 100. Ito kay joint arrangement, this is contractual agreement lang between the parties. So, PFRS 11 defines a joint arrangement as an arrangement in which two or more parties have joint control. Ibig sabihin, may joint control lang sila sa kung ano yung gagawin nila. Joint control. Ngayon, ano ang characteristics ng isang joint arrangement? So, I've said, parties are bound by a contractual agreement. Mag-agree sila. Ano yung papasukan nilang investment na gustong gawin? Yeah? Pangalawa, contractual arrangements gives two or more of those parties joint control of the arrangement. Yung nag-contractual agreement sila. Gives two or more of those parties joint control over the arrangement. Kung ano pag-usapan nilang gagawin nila. Ngayon, ano nga ba itong joint control? Joint control is the contractually agreed sharing of control of an arrangement which exists only when decisions about the relevant activities require the unanimous, ibig sabihin lahat sila, unanimous consent of the parties sharing control because from the term itself, joint control. Joint control. Joint, pareho silang may control. Oo. So yan, kaya unanimous consent. Ngayon, when talking about joint arrangement, may bukas pa. Dalawang types meron yan. Joint operation and joint venture. Ngayon, joint operation is a joint arrangement whereby the parties, yung nagpasok sa contractual agreement na yan, have joint control over the arrangement, have rights, ito yung distinguishing factor nila din tandaan nyo, have rights to the assets and obligations for the liabilities relating to the arrangement. Ang tawag sa mga parties hindi sa arrangement na to, joint operators. Ngayon, pagdating sa joint venture, it is a joint arrangement kung saan yung mga parties na may joint control, yung arrangement nila, yung rights, they have rights to the net assets of the arrangement. Those parties are called joint venturers. Now, take note of this, di ba? Asset. Ano yung accounting natin? Asset is equals to liabilities plus equity. Joint operators, ito sa kanila. Joint ventures, net assets, another word for net asset, equity. Yan yung sa kanila. Joint venturers, ito naman sa joint operation. Kaya, assets and obligations for the liabilities. Yan yung kanilang labot. So, paano malalaman? Based sa facts and circumstances of the problem, kita mo na assets and liabilities yung kanilang rights, that is joint operation. Pero nakita mo na, or on the other hand, kapag nakita mo sa net assets yung rights nila, yeah, you can say na that is a joint venture. Yeah? Also, when we go into an in-depth discussion of this, may mga other consideration din yan na tinitingnan like separate vehicle, kung ano yung other facts and circumstances sa case. Pero of course, ang pinag-uusapan natin ito kasi advanced accounting topic rin to eh. So, yung core principle lang muna. So, joint operations, financial reporting by joint operators. A joint operator shall recognize in relation to its interest in a joint operation yung assets. Ito ma-recognize sila ni yung assets nila, including shares sa any assets held jointly. Liabilities nila, including your shares. Revenue from the sale of its share of the output arising from joint operation. Its share of the revenue from the sale of the output to joint operation. Its expenses, including its share. Any expenses incurred jointly. So, basahin nyo lang yung examples yan sa book ni Zeus sa CFAS. So, ito accounting. Core principle lang naman kasi ang importante dito. Pinag-usapan natin. CFAS to eh. Separate accounting records may or may not be required for the joint operation itself, and financial statements may or may not be prepared for the joint operation. However, kapag yung joint operators, they may prepare management account para at least meron silang record, di ba? So that they may be able to assess the performance of the joint operation. Oh, napindot ang end. Napindot natin ang end. So, yan no? Simple lang, madali lang sa joint arrangement. So, types of joint arrangement. Una, joint operation, parties. Nawala yung ano. Joint operation, parties that have joint control. O, takpan. Parties that have joint control over the rights ng assets and obligations for the liability relating to joint arrangement, normally not structured to a separate vehicle. Ano yung separate vehicle, sir? Parang ano lang yan eh. Example. Ito ka, gusto nyo magano ng business nyo. So, mukhang chike. Basically, parang dalawa yan. Ikaw to, si A, si B, nag-decide sila na papasok sila sa isang joint arrangement kung saan through a separate vehicle para yung separate vehicle na yon may kanya siyang may independent may independent management siya. Pero yung mga relevant decisions, yung magdi-decide pa rin yan yung original party. Pero when it comes to the management, yung daily operations kumbaga, etong si separate vehicle, independent yan siya na mag-isa. Pero when it comes to important decisions, sina A and B pa rin yung magdi-decide. Pero yung operations, yung ma-manage day-to-day, separate vehicle, siya na yan mag-isa. Yun yung meaning ng separate vehicle. So in this case, normally joint operations, walang separate vehicles normally. Bakit? Kasi pagdating ng joint operations, as you can see dyan sa example ng book ni Zeus, yung entity mismo yung nag-e-engage. Yeah? Yung entity mismo yung nagtatrabaho. Pagdating sa joint operations sila. So, paano accounting? Recognize own assets, liabilities, income, and expenses plus their share in the assets, liabilities, income, and expenses ng kanilang joint operation. When an entity acquires an interest in a joint operation whose activity consists of business, the entity shall account for it as for its share as business combination. Yan, joint operation yan. Joint venture naman, and as you can see dyan sa book ni Zeus, joint venture, apart from IFRS 9, IFRS 11, diba? Some parts of the PAS 28, dinidiscuss din siya. PAS 28. Yeah? Some parts din, kaya familiar to sa inyo. So, parties that have, joint control sa net assets sa equity portion lang. Structured to a separate vehicle, so yun, joint si venturer A, venturer B, kay separate vehicle, para si separate vehicle na yung mag-manage ng day-to-day operations. Pero yung important decisions, A and B yan. However, the terms of the contractual arrangement and other facts and circumstances, just because may sinabing separate vehicle, hindi yan definitive answer kasi ito. However, the terms of the contractual arrangement and other facts and circumstances may lead a joint arrangement structured to a separate vehicle to be classified as joint operation. Paano yan? Ito, in-depth na yan. Doon na tayo sana yan. Pagdating ng accounting for special transactions. And if gusto nyo, meron naman tayong video dito sa YouTube channel na to para sa joint arrangement. BAPE 6. So, sa accounting equity method, however, in the separate FS, the investment is accounted for either at cost, fair value in accordance with PFRS 9 and using the equity method. So, simple lang yan siya, no? Joint arrangement. Diyan sa nakakatakot na topic. So, dito sa application of concepts. So, si read ko and learn ko are national distributors of books. Okay? Si read and write enters into contract to acquire. Bakit read and learn ko? Tapos read and write. Baka ano to eh. Saan yun? Nawala naman yung ano. Baka feel ko ano to, learn. No, parang learn to, no. Read and learn enters into contract to acquire a warehouse in a particular region. Each party will use the warehouse to store its own inventories. The parties agree to share in the cost of acquiring and maintaining the warehouse. The arrangement between read and learn, is most likely joint operation. Kasi first of all, tiyan nyo, hindi sila nag-ano ng separate vehicle. And tingnan nyo, gaya na sabi din kanina, sila mismo nag-participate. Each party will use the warehouse to store its own inventories. Then mag-share lang sila sa cost of acquiring and maintaining the warehouse. So, mayroon talaga silang personal involvement. Di na nila kailangan ng separate vehicle. So, that is a joint venture. Joint operation. Dito naman sa baba. Read ko and learn ko are publishers of textbooks. Read and learn enters into contract to put up a bookstore which shall be named Knowledge Bookstore. Knowledge. Magano sila ng bookstore kung saan papangalanan nila as Knowledge Bookstore. Knowledge will have its own assets and incur its own liabilities and earn and incur its own revenues and expenses. So parang familiar. Parang may sarili siyang operation. Separate vehicle. Read and learn will each have a 50% interest. So yun, net assets. And the net assets and profits of knowledge. So ito, klarong-klaro, joint venture. Yung tayo sa number 3. Techco and robotics co are joint operators. So sinabi na agad. In the development of Super OS, a mobile phone operating system. Each joint operator retains control over the assets it has contributed to the joint operation and shares equal in the profit or losses of the joint operation. Klarong-klaro, joint operation. During the year, Techco earns revenue of 1 million from its own operations. Sales of Super OS amount to 400,000. So how much is the total revenue? How much total revenue shall be reported by Techco in its statement of profit or loss for the year? So simple lang, yeah? Yung 1M niya plus yung kinita niya. And yung share sila sa equally sa profit or loss ng joint operation. 400 yung kinita, so 400k times 50%. That is 1.2. Letter B. Dito sa number 4. Entity A acquires 50% interest in a joint venture. 50% interest so masa joint venture for 1 million peso. Appropriately records the transaction under an investment account. Under the end of the period, the joint venture reports profit of 1 million and distributes 600,000 to the owners. How much is the carrying amount of the investment account na meron si A sa kanyang current year financial statements in relation to that joint venture? So, that's simple lang yun. So, 1 million plus, kasi nag-venture siya, kasi ang tiyatanong dito, yung investment account, nagpasok siya ng 1 million. So, that's 1 million. Plus, at the end, nag-report ng profit of 1 million. And yung interest niya dyan is 50%. So, 1 million ulit times 50%. However, nagkaroon ng distribution of 600,000 to the owners. So, that is a deduction of 600 times 50%. 600k 600k times 50%. So, yan. Calculate natin. 1 plus 1 times 0.50 plus minus 0.6 times 0.5. That's 1.2 million. Coincidence? Siguro na 1.2 rin. So yeah, ganun kasimple lang yan. So with that, next tayo. Okay, fast track tayo dito sa next topic natin kasi madali lang naman to kahit basahin nyo na lang tong PowerPoint na to. Ito yung disclosure of interest in other entities, PFRS 12. So, anong learning objectives natin dito? Describe the objective of PFRS 12 and second, state the types of investment that are within the scope of PFRS 12. So, anong labot ng PFRS 12 na to? We're talking about disclosure of interest in other entities. According to PFRS 12, its objective is to prescribe the minimum disclosure requirements for an entity's interest in other entities, particularly the nature of and that is associated with those interests and the effects of those interests on the entity's financial statement. So as you can see here, ito yung importansya ng PFRS 12. Basically, ang sinasabi niya dito is the relationship between entities may have an effect on them, particularly in their financial statements. Now, in order to give the users a full view or a significant amount of view on how things are going on, so disclosure siya nilalagay. And in this case, sabi ni PFRS 12, isama na rin natin yung relationship ng entities kasi as we know, this relationship, may influence yan, may effect yan sa magiging operation sila, which in turn will have an effect on their financial statements. Magkakaroon ng effect sa kanilang assets, liabilities, equity, income, expenses. So, ang sinasabi ni PFRS 12, present na lang natin para at least alam ng user. Para at least alam ng user ano yung nangyayari. Para magkaroon sila ng additional information sa kanilang informed judgment na, subsidiary niya pala to. Parent niya pala to. Nagjo-joint venture pala sila. Kasi nakita nila sa disclosure eh. Okay. So, may relationship sila. Yan yung objective ni PFRS 12 basically. So, what do we mean when we talk about interest in another entity? Interest in another entity, ito, basahin lang natin provided naman ni PFRS 12. Huwag natin pahirapan ang sarili natin. Refers to involvement that exposes an entity to variability of returns from the performance of another entity. As we have said, yun yung importansya It affects the other entity that it has relationship with. So, in turn, because it has an effect on that entity, kailangan mag-properly disclose tayo. Let us disclose the fact na merong relationship because it affects them. It is evidenced by the holding of the equity or debt instruments or other form of involvement. Kaya bumili ka ng stock or you have a bond coming from that entity, such as the provisions of funding, liquidity support, credit enhancement, and guarantees. This includes the means by which an entity obtains control, joint control, or significant influence over another entity. So as you can see, kasama na yun sina subsidiary, sina significant influence, sina associates. An entity does not necessarily have an interest in another entity solely because of typical customer relationship. Hindi lang yan. Just because not enough. Not limited to that. Kasi may holding of equity, debt instrument. Holding equity, may investment ka dyan. Significant influence, investment na associate. Pasok ka dyan. Debt instrument, malaki. Yung entity na yan, ng bonds. May bonds siya. And binili mo yung bonds niya. Debt instrument yun. May significant influence ka dyan. Yun lang. Interest in another entity. Ito yung scope ng PFRS 12. PFRS 12 applies to entities that have an interest in, provided naman, unsubsidiary. Kasi nga, control. Second, joint arrangement, joint operations, or joint venture. Kasi may joint control kayo Okay. May joint control kayo Associate, investment associate, PAS 28, And lastly, unsolicited structured entity. So PFRS 12 does not apply to an interest in another entity that is accounted for in accordance with PFRS 9 financial instruments. Bakit? Because in PFRS 9, yung investment mo sa stocks is just basically you are a regular investor. Wala kang dyan nag-invest ka lang dyan. Wala kang influensya na nagagawa dyan sa investee mo. You're just an investor. In this case, as you can see, subsidiary, joint arrangement, associate, and unconsolidated structured entity. Mayroon kayong influence yan. May nagagawa kayo, may impact kayo kumbaga. Pero pag regular investor ka lang under PFRS 9, wala lang. Ngayon, we're talking about minimum disclosures. Ito yung minimum requirements lang yung at least ma-disclose mo lang naman to. Yan ang sinasabi ni PFRS 12. At least itong mga items na to, ma-disclose mo. Pero if gusto mo more than that, sure, why not? It's your own ikaw na bahala. So, significant judgment and assumptions in determining the existence of the control, joint control, or significant influence over an investee or the type of joint arrangement. So, ito lang mga minimum disclosures under PFRS 12, yung mga prescribed minimum. So, basahin nyo na lang. Yeah? Interest in subsidiaries, ito yung mga kailangan mo i-disclose. Ito, basahin na lang. Significant restrictions, changes in ownership, and any defense. Kasi disclosure man tayo. Pagdating naman sa interest in joint arrangement and investment associate na material, ito naman yung mga required minimum kailangan mong i-disclose. So sila, nakalista naman. So yun lang si PFRS 12. About disclosures lang requirements. So basahin natin to. Application of concepts. Which of the following? Huwag yung sabing nagmamadali ka. Yan, dito tayo nagmamadali dito. Ang maikli lang talaga tong si PFRS 12. Yung core principle lang na may mahalaga. Which of the following is outside the scope of PFRS 12? Associate, kasama yan. Investment subsidiary, kasama yan. Joint venture, kasama yan. Holding for securities, hindi yan kasama. Outside the scope yan, that is PFRS 9. Oops, nakarangan. Baba natin. That is PFRS 9. Sabi natin, PFRS 9, since regular investor lang yan, wala siyang impact. Number 2 tayo. According to PFRS 12, interest in another entity refers to contractual and uncontractual involvement that exposes an entity to variable returns, the performance of entity, typical hindi. Interest that give holder control over investee. Ito hindi rin all of this, since wala nito. Letter A. So yan lang. Ganyan kasimple si PFRS 12. Next tayo. Okay, dito tayo ngayon sa ating next topic, which is fair value measurement, PFRS 13. Now, familiar sa inyo si PFRS 13 kasi ilang beses natin to nakikita sa ibang standard because like impairment, this is a standard or a concept that encompasses other standards also that also provides guidance to them. Fair value measurement, PFRS 13. So, anong learning objectives natin for this one? Define fair value and state the principles used in measuring fair value. Diba? As I have said, or as we have seen, sa discussions natin, PFRS 13, ilang beses na may mention yan. Because like impairment, it also encompasses other standards because it provides guidance for them in their valuation, in their measurement. Because yun yung main principle ni PFRS 13. So, anong scope ni PFRS 13, mga kapatid? So, PFRS 13 applies to the fair value measurement. Fair value. And related disclosures of an asset, liability, or equity when other PFRS requirements or requires measurement at fair value or fair value less cost to sell. Ganyan sabi natin. Kapag sinabi ng standard na fair value or fair value less cost to sell ang gagamitin, pasok si PFRS 13. Because yan yung kanyang expertise, diba? Sa kanya kalalapit, parang ganun. So, ngayon, ano nga ba itong fair value? Now, pag mapapansin nyo, itong definition ng fair value na to, parati itong natatanong sa mga sa board exam, sir? Hindi. Napakasimple kasi nito Pero parati ito siyang natatanong sa mga competitions. Ano yung fair value? Sabi, according to PFRS 13, kasi if I remember correctly, before PFRS 13, kasi as you can see, PFRS yan. So, bago lang yan. PFRS 13, bago lang yan. Before that, meron yung standard na nag-define ng fair value, pero napalitan na yun. It was succeeded by this one. So, fair value is the price that would be received to sell an asset or paid to transfer liability in an orderly transaction between market participants at the measurement date. So, yan daw. Kung ano yung ma-receive mo pag nagbenta ka ng asset, o anong babayaran mo to transfer liability. Yeah? Kung ano yung napagkasunduan basically in order transaction between market participants, yun yung mako-consider mo as fair value. Another name na pwede natin gamitin is market value, di ba? Kasi market value, yung perceived value ng market na meron. Kung ano yung perceived value ng market over that. Yeah? In this case, similar. Kung ano yung perceived value, yun yung babayaran mo, yun yung tatanggapin mo, yun yung transfer mo. Yeah? Yan yung fair value. Ngayon, paano ang measurement nito? Fair value is based on the market price of the asset in a principal market or kapag walang principal market, the most advantageous market. Paano malaman? Meron tayong example niyan later on. So, dito, pag i-compute natin fair value, market price in principal or most advantageous market minus the transport cost. Kasi nga, that is additional expenses. The market price used in measuring fair value is not adjusted for any transaction cost. Wala, kasama yan. Pero pag mayroon transport cost, adjust mo yan, bawasan mo. Para malaman mo yung fair value. Ngayon, if you can still remember, di ba, na-mention natin yung fair value hierarchy, yung level 1, level 2, level 3, ito yung itsura niya. Ito yung itsura niya. Para malaman mo kung ano yung fair value na gagamitin mo. Yung level 1, priority yan. Hierarchy kasi yan eh. Because that is the most reliable one. Observable inputs that reflect quoted price for identical assets or liabilities in an active market. Kasi nga active market, so alam mo talaga na ginagawa yan nila. Na nagtatransact talaga sila dyan. And that the market is active, so they can provide a more reliable, a more properly represented value for the quoted prices. Ngayon, pag sabi dito, di ba? Pag walang active market, principal market, punta ka sa next, level 2. Inputs other than quoted prices included in level 1 that are observable for the asset or liability either directly or through corroboration, corroborate mo yan, with observable data, then level 2. Ngayon, pag wala ka ng choice, level 3. Unobservable inputs, for example, an entity's own data assumption or data assumptions. So ito nakikita to siyang fair value hierarchy, di ba? Nasa pag sinabi ng standard na may fair value, pasok yan si PFRS 13. And pag mag-determine na ng amount ni PFRS ang fair value, ito yung gagamitin, ito yung fair value hierarchy. Pero usually given naman eh. Given na yan, maraming problema dyan. So yan yung discussion. Kaya maikli lang yan. CFAS to. And madali lang topic na to. Because it encompasses other topics that you are already familiar with this one. So punta tayo sa tawag dito natin, application of concepts. 5 minutes pa lang, tapos na. Because very basic to siya. So, according to PFRS 13, what is the best evidence of fair value of an asset? So, best evidence, fair value of an asset, ang number 1, letter A, its quoted price in active market if one exists. Letter B, a price determined based on observable data, maximizing the use of external data. Its estimated value you determined using management estimation, the present value. Letter D, the present value of future cash flow derivable asset. Dito lang yung beso. Dito lang, level 1. So, letter A. Number 2. Which of the following statements is incorrect regarding the, incorrect ang hinanap, regarding the inputs that can be observed or that can be used, to measure fair value. So, level 1 inputs are the most reliable. Fair value measurement and level 3 inputs are the least reliable. Yes, okay, kakano lang natin. Level 3 measurement are quoted prices in active markets. Level 3 measurements are quoted prices in active markets for identical. Identical, hindi similar, okay? Identical, hindi yung specific but rather yung ka-same niya lang, yeah? Ka-genus niya. A fair value measurement based on management assumptions only, no market data would not be acceptable. Acceptable pa rin, kapatid. Pero hindi siya yung priority. O kaya entities own data acceptable pero hindi priority. Pero hindi siya reliable or least reliable, kasi level 1 yung reliable. So wala to. The level in the fair value hierarchy of a fair value measurement is determined by the level of the highest level significant inputs. So check. Okay, saan dito? 1, 2. Okay, letter B. So, ito tayo. May solving. May solving tayo, kapatid. So, use the following information for the next 3 questions. So, si entity A, yung assets niya, have a carrying amount of 100,000 before year-end adjustment. So, yung PFRS that governs this asset requires this asset to be measured at fair value at each reporting date. So, sinabing fair value, pasok dyan si PFRS 13. Para pag may marinig siyang fair value, yes, sabi ni PFRS 13. Ganun yun. Same in impairment. Pag may na-mention na impairment, takbo siya. IAS 36 yun. Pag may na-mention na fair value, tatakbo si PFRS 13 para i-present niyang sarili niya. Yeah? So, location, the PFRS requires this asset to be measured at fair value to each reporting date. Location is a characteristic of the assets. Information at year-end is follow. So, ito ang active market 1 kasi balikan nyo natin to mga active markets. So, active market 1, quoted price, transfer cost, cost to sell. Active market 2, quoted price, transfer cost. So, sa number 3, if active market 1 is the principal market for entity A's biological asset, kasi sabi natin, na-apply to. How much is the fair value? How much is the fair value? So, that is, ito yan, minus the transport cost. So, that is 130 minus 10, that is 120. Yan. Pag sinabi na active market si na active market number 1, may active, yan yung principal market. Ngayon, sa number 4, ang sabi, if neither active market number 1 nor active market number 2 is the principal market, ano yung fair value? Ano yung gagamitin fair value? Nalaman mo hindi principal market. O gamitin mo yung level of hierarchy. Gamitin yung mga Ito, principal market. Okay. Active market number 1 ang sabi. The next thing, walang principal market. Okay, ito ang next mong gagamitin. The most advantageous market in the absence of a principal market. So, paano natin malalaman kung sino most advantageous market? I-add mo lang tong sila. Add mo. Compute mo lang to sila. Magkano yung marireceive mo? O, di ba? 130 minus 10 minus 2. That is 118. Makaka-receive ka ng 118 sa number 1. 118K yung marireceive mo. Kasi ito sila yan. Ngayon, pwede tayo sa active market number 2. 135 minus 12 minus 3. Para kay number 2, ang marireceive mo is 120. Ngayon, tatanungin kita, ano yung advantageous dyan? Sino sa kanilang dalawa yung most advantageous? Si market number 2. Kasi nga, ang marireceive mo 120 in total. Si number 1, ang marireceive mo lang 118. So, in this case, anong mangyayari? Active market number 2 ang gagamitin natin for number 4. So, ang ilalagay mo ba is yung 120 agad-agad? Hindi. Gagamitin mo lang to, isusolve mo lang yan silang lahat para maghanap ng advantageous market. But kapag ilalagay mo na yung amount ng fair value, gagamitin mo pa rin to. Ito pa rin gagamitin mo. Okay? So, with that, 135 minus 12, that's 123,000. Take note when looking for the advantageous market, itong gagawin mo. Isama mo yun sila lahat. But, it is only used for determining which the most advantageous one. Kapag nakita mo na kung sino yung most advantageous one, the most advantageous market, okay, follow. Ito lang gagamitin mo. Simple lang, di ba? Simple. So, that is 135 minus 12. 135 minus 12. 1, 2, 3. Simple. Okay. Next tayo. Okay na, no? Goods na. Okay, goods na. Next tayo. Okay, so dito tayo ngayon sa ating last topic for this lecture video, which is regulatory deferral accounts or under PFRS 14. So itong regulatory deferral accounts, under in this topic, negligible lang naman to. Wala to sa problema. Basahin na lang natin. Hindi naman to siya hassle. And hindi rin, parang siya parang wala siyang labot sa buhay natin. Basically, basahin nyo parang, ano to siya? Parang wala siyang wala siyang importansya. Parang ikaw sa kanya. Pero basahin na lang natin for discussion purposes, academic purposes. So, ano nga ba itong regulatory deferral accounts? As you know, describes the applicability of PFRS 14. Ngayon, as you know, from the word deferred, di ba? Deferred, you're delaying the recognition. Yun yung meaning ng deferred, di ba? So, in this case, ito na yung pinag-usapan natin ito, regulatory deferral account. Delay in the recognition kung saan sa future mo pa siya re-recognize. So, ang scope ng PFRS 14, basahin na lang natin, specifies the financial reporting requirements for regulatory deferral accounts balance arising from the sale of goods services that are subject to rate regulation. Ngayon, si PFRS 14 optional standard lang yan that is available to first-time adopters. Yung sa PFRS 1 na pag-usapan natin. Yung mga nag-transition, kasi diba 2005 bata yun, yung sabi natin, doon nag-start yung application ng PFRS or IFRS, PFRS dito sa Pilipinas. So may mga first-time adopters tayo from the previous using of US GAAP. In that case, sa mga only first-time adopters, dyan lang applicable si PFRS 14 pero optional. Pag later on, existing PFRS user na yung category mo, prohibited ka na pang PFRS 14. So, parang transitional standard siya na gagamitin. So, definition of terms tayo. Basahin na lang. Regulatory deferral account balance. So, ano ito siya? The balance of any expense or income account that would not be recognized as an asset or liability in accordance with other standards but that qualifies for deferral, ibig sabihin for future recognition because it is included or is expected to be included by the rate regulator in establishing the rates that can be charged on customer. So, yun yung regulatory deferral. Binibigyan nila yun agad eh. Pag bibigyan si problem, ipakompute sa inyo, accountants. Rate regulation. A framework or for establishing the prices that can be charged to customers for goods or services and that the framework is subject to oversight and approval by a rate regulator. O ano tong rate regulator to? Rate regulator, nakakawala siya ng gana. An authorized body that is empowered by statute or regulation, hindi siya exciting na topic eh. On regulation to establish the right or a range of rates that bind an entity, the rate regulator may be a third-party body or related party of the entity including the entity's own governing board if the body is required by statute or regulation to set rates both in the interest of the customer and to ensure the overall financial viability of the entity. Yeah? Boring na topic to siya. So, anong principles under PFRS 14? A first-time adopter continues to apply its previous GAAP to the recognition. Kasi sa atin, di ba? 2005, nag-transition tayo from GAAP to, or US GAAP to PFRS, or the IFRS to Philippine to PFRS. So, measurement, impairment, recognition, measurement, impairment, and the recognition of regulatory deferral accounts, balances, except for changes in accounting policies and the presentation of the regulatory deferral account. So, an entity is prohibited from changing its accounting policy in order to start recognizing regulatory deferral accounts. Balance. So, pagdating sa presentation, pagdating sa financial position o yung balance sheet natin, separate line items are presented for the totals. Kapag regulatory deferral account debit balance and regulatory deferral account credit balance. But take note, pag nakita niyo sa example sa book ni Zeus, yung regulatory deferral account balances mo, hindi siya pinipresent under current or non-current. Kasi na kita nyo, di ba? May separate may separate category siya. Instead, they are presented separately from the subtotals of assets and liabilities that are presented in accordance with other standards. Kita nyo sa book ni Zeus. Yung example doon. Pagdating naman sa statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income, separate line items are presented. In OCI, for the net movement of regulatory deferral accounts, balances that relates to item recognized in the OCI, showing distinctions now between those that will be and will not be reclassified to profit or loss, and in profit or loss for the remaining net movement of regulatory deferral account balances, excluding movements that are not reflected in profit or loss. Boring na topic. Nakakawala ng gana pag boring yung topic. Wala sa excitement. So ito, dito tayo sa application of concepts. When a first-time adopter chooses to apply PFRS 14, it is required to recognize regulatory accounts. Hindi. Changes in accounting policy in account for regulatory deferral balances in accordance with the recognition principle. Continue to apply its previous GAAP to accounts for it, regulatory deferral account. Okay, to changes account file start. Deferral, letter C. So, number 2, according to PFRS 14, dito, continue to apply its previous GAAP. Nakalagay dito. Ito. According to PFRS 14, regulatory deferral accounts are classified in the state of financial position as hindi. Ito, nakalagay naman dito. Neither, not presented. So, yan yung discussion natin for this lecture video. So, with that, second to the last lecture video natin to. Yung next lecture video will be the last one for CFAS. So, with that, bye-bye. Love you.